Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles. Back in the day, this brewery was best known for their imperial stouts and their fruity sours, but in more recent times they've been doing a lot of different kinds of IPAs, so it's probably most accurate to say that this brewery is just very, very well rounded. They were also one of the first Swedish craft breweries that I encountered when I moved over here back in 2015, and I always like trying the new things that they're releasing. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know these guys can do very well. It is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and yeah, I have heard that this one is pretty nice and drinkable, so quite curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And we're going to go out to the east of the city this time to Landvetter, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called Nimbus. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget for October of 2022. And yeah, this one was released along with the Nebula, which we reviewed a few videos ago. But yeah, we've had some really nice IPAs from Dugges over the last wee while. Their beers always tend to be really solid and very drinkable as well. So yeah, always nice to return to these guys when we get the chance. Let's see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Dugges Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and use the geography based tagging system. You can search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. You'll also find this beer in the Swedish playlist, and there are playlists there for beers from all the different countries that we've reviewed on the channel before. So yeah, let's crack on and have a little chat about Dugges Bryggeri itself then. On to my brewery notes. So, as I've told you before, Dugges Bryggeri are based in Landvetter out to the east of Gothenburg, very close to the airport, and the brewery was established back in 2005 in Mölndal to the south of Gothenburg by Mikael Engström Dugge, whom of course it takes its name from, Dugge Dugges. So, a few years prior to this, Mikael had met an Englishman who was selling second-hand breweries, and this really got him thinking about brewing his own beer. So he studied the very complex Swedish alcohol laws, he visited different breweries around the country, and he also started buying up equipment to put together his own brewery. And all of this culminated with the opening of the first Dugges facility in Mölndal back in 2005. Over the following years, he started to develop different recipes and experimented and built up the brewery capacity, but by 2009, the brewery had outgrown this original facility, and so they made the decision to move away, and they moved up to Landvetter the following year in 2010. So the older brewery had a capacity of 1,500 hectolitres per year at maximum, so that's like 150,000 litres, which is actually quite small, even when you think about new breweries today, but they started off with a capacity of 8,000 hectolitres per year at the new brewery, and from what I understand, this has been more than doubled in recent years. But over the years, of course, the brewery have become very well known for lots of different things. Back in the day, Dugges Bryggeri were known for their big imperial stouts and their fruity juicy sours. There was a period of time where Dugges was known, I believe officially, as Dugges Öl och Porter Bryggeri. So this was when they were doing mainly kind of dark beers and fruity sours. But in more recent times, they've been doing a lot of different series of beers. They had the Fresh and the Crush series, which were the New England IPAs. They also had the Bite series, which were West Coast IPAs. And of course, you've got the Future series, which are the big barrel-aged things. And you've also got the Mega series, which are the, 15% plus imperial stouts. So, Dugges have done a hell of a lot of things. So, yeah. Lots and lots of interesting beers. But these guys are also one of the co-owners of the two Brewers beer bars in Gothenburg, along with All In Brewing, who are one of the gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area, and Electric Nurse, I believe, as well, who are run by Mikael's daughter Ida and her husband John. So yeah, I think those are very good as well. You should go and check those out. The Tredje Långgatan one, if I remember correctly, is the original. But yeah, they have been producing some spirits as well, from what I believe. So I'll need to have a little look at those. But yeah, these days Dugas are producing a lot of IPAs. There's still Imperial Stouts coming out steadily as well. And yeah, they've done a number of different things over the years. I'd love to see a few more lagers from them and some kind of Scotch ales and barley wines, you know, some more brown sugary type stuff. But yeah, a lot of IPAs and Imperial Stouts from Dugas these days. So yeah, definitely one of the Swedish breweries you need to check out. These guys are one of the most established names when it comes to Swedish craft beer, and you'll always get a solid beer from them, I have to say. Other than that, I don't think we really need to say anything. We need to say anything more about Dugas Bryggeri, other than to tell you you need to try some of their beers. My favourite ones, I would say, would be the Big Egypt. The Tropic Thunder is one of the Swedish classic sour beers for me. That was a collaboration with Stillwater Artisanal, of course, so try that one if you get the chance. And yeah, you know, they're always pumping out different IPAs, so have a go at one of those and see what you think. But probably my favourite beer from them in recent times would have been Nimbus, which was the West Coast IPA that we reviewed maybe 2 months ago. That was really true to the West Coast style. You know, it was a proper old school sea hop West Coast IPA. But yeah, as I say, if you want to learn more about Dugas Bryggeri, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a wee look at this beer itself. So as I mentioned to you earlier, this one is a 6.5% New England IPA. I believe this can cost me 50 Swedish kroner, so that is about €5, somewhere in the region of £4.50 sterling, and I guess about $6 American, something like that. But yeah, as you can see, it's very nicely presented. There you can see the Dugas D. You also have the A luminous cloud, which I quite like, and you've also got this symbol for Dugas Bryggeri on the back as well. But yeah, this is a new thing, having these 500ml cans and also having Dugas in the name as well. Previously, it would have just been Nimbus on its own, but plain silver top on the can here. As we said, it's a ½ litre, and it tells you a little blurb here too. So it says, this is Nimbus, and Nimbus is a luminous cloud surrounding a supernatural being. It is also a citrusy, tropical, sweet, fruity, stone fruity, grapefruity, piney, zesty, flowery, earthy, and woody IPA. Hello, or halo, I guess we would say. But yeah, it tells you on the side of the can here. I forgot this when we did the review of the Nebula a wee while ago, but this one contains Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe and Talus. We know these hops fairly well. All of them are American. I believe they're all about 14% alpha acid as well. Citra's going to give you that big kind of mango flavour with a little bit of lemon and lime. Mosaic is a more kind of tangerine sort of flavour. Simcoe, I told you lies actually, Simcoe's about 12% alpha acid, and it gives you that softer kind of passion fruit in a New England IPA. Whereas Talus, I think that is maybe, yeah, about 15% alpha acid, maybe slightly stronger, but it gives you this big kind of pink grapefruity sort of thing. You also get some of that coconutty note that you'll get from Sabro as well. But yeah, as I say, I do like these new ½ litre cans from Dugas. I wonder why they decided to go with ½ litres rather than 440s. Maybe it's just easier to calculate for the size of their brew kit and thing that they have. But yeah, 6.5% New England IPA, this one. Let's get it out into the glass and see what we have. Yeah, so there we go. This should be pretty good. We've always had good IPAs from Dugas. As I say, I think if I remember rightly, the Fresh series was the one that the Fresh and the Crush were the two series of New England IPAs they had until quite recently. One of them was the single IPAs, one of them was the double IPAs. I think the Crush was maybe the really easy drinking ones, the lighter ones, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, as you can see, I think we've poured about 60%, maybe 70% of the beer out into the glass for this one, but it does look very, very nice, and pretty much as you would expect for a New England IPA. So you can see when the beer poured, it had about a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of very slightly cream coloured head. You can have a little look at the bubbles there. medium-sized bubbles for me, not, you know, this beer isn't madly foamy and things, but yeah, fairly nice medium-sized bubbles there. The head, of course, is fading away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer, and colour-wise, this beer is actually quite light in terms of its complexion. It's more like a kind of pineapple and mango juice. I always like comparing New England IPAs to different kinds of fruit juices because that's really just what the appearance reminds me of. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort ball is also going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour beer. Any barrel aging that you do around adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too, but you don't really have to care about that when it comes to IPAs. It's not very common at all. But yeah, this beer for me is a nice kind of light mango and pineapple juice type colour. The level of haze in this one for a 6.5% as well. It does have a good little bit of opacity to it, but you are getting bits of light coming through the edge of it. But remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well. There's not really a rule about, you know, going further up the alcohol scale. You should have more oats and wheat, thus more haziness. It doesn't quite work like that. It varies from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe. But yeah, for 6.5% ABV, it's certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest of New Englands you're going to come across, but, you know, neither is it out of place, I guess we could say that. But yeah, in terms of the carbonation and things in this one, you can see there are one or two big bubbles just sticking to the side of the glass there, and a few little ones going up toward the, pardon me, the bottom of the head there. But yeah, that head has faded away to be a nice thin foamy layer. I don't really think we need to say much more about the appearance of this beer. It looks as you would expect for a New England hazy IPA. So yeah, let's have a little look at this one then and see what we have. I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to be like. So, aroma time. Yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty nice actually. I've always found, you know, the Dugas beers are always quite smooth and they're always quite just light and drinkable, especially at the 6.5% ABV. You know, and this one is kind of really similar to that. You've got a lovely, quite bright green component to this one. The malt base just has a lovely kind of smoothness to it. You get a slight degree of sweetness, and you've also got those big, just soft, fruity characters in this beer as well. This gives you everything you would want from a 6.5% IPA. You know, it is just really nice and drinkable. Yeah. Aroma wise, yeah, it's lovely actually, just big and juicy. You know, you wouldn't expect anything else from Dugas. These beers are always pretty damn solid actually. Yeah, lovely smelling beer this one. Let's break it down though for you and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So we'll start with the kind of malty side of things as we always do. So, backbone of the beer. The malty side of things, you've got a little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. You always get this with New England IPAs. There's a little bit of that in there. This one has a little bit of that more kind of, you know, floury type thing to it. You get that as if you've got the bread crust fresh out of the oven. You put that little bit of flour on it there. It's just absolutely lovely. So you've got that in there. Overall, as I've said to you, there are 6 ways a New England IPA can lean. You can have the sort of farmhousey, yeasty side of things. You can have the rye leaning grainy side of it. Those are more common in American brewed New Englands, but you've got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also a slight degree of sweetness as well. Yeah, I mean, with this one, you get a little bit of wheatiness. I do think the wheatiness kind of dominates in this a little bit. You do get some oatiness and you also get a little bit of sweetness. But as I say, pardon me, as I say, the backbone of this beer is that fresh, white bready bread crust. That is absolutely forming the backbone of this beer. So you smell that in there. On top of that, you get, so you've got the fresh white bread crust, definitely some soft, fluffy white bread in there, but then you get the wheat in this beer, and the wheat for me is actually quite, the wheat in this beer is actually quite, it's got a little bit of zip to it, which is kind of interesting. Like, definitely in the back of the nose, you do get a little bit of that zippiness from the wheat, which I quite enjoy. But then above that, you've got the nice kind of light, creamy and smooth oats. There's a little bit of sweetness in there. So, yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So, yeah, bit of fresh bread crust, teeny little bit of kind of, there's a tiny little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready note in there. Soft white bread from the barley malt, the wheat, which has a little bit of bitiness to it. Then you also have that kind of creamy, you do have that little bit of kind of creamy oaty character in there, but you've also got that little bit of kind of Werther's Original, butter candy, butterscotch. You know, there is just a little touch of sweetness to this one. I get the feeling there might be a little bit of golden promise in this, because there's also just a little touch of a kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity sort of thing in this beer too. So yeah, aroma wise, this is very, very nice. Yeah, malty wise, everything you kind of expect from a Dugas IPA. If you know this brewery, it will feel quite familiar to you. On the hoppy side of things then, green component, there's a little touch of earthiness in there. I think that's going to be mostly Mosaic out of these 4 hops that's going to give you that. So there is a little bit of earthiness there, and you've also got that nice big bright green floral note to this one. Remember, New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping. You've also got early addition hopping in there. Early addition gives you lots of bitterness. That's within the first hour of the wort boil. Late addition, last half hour of the wort boil, little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping, of course, is after the wort boil and gives you only flavour and aroma. New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3. This one, you can tell from the brightness of the green component, it is relying on late addition and dry hopping for sure. So you get that nice bright kind of floral character out of this one. There's also a good little bit of grassy zestiness in there, and I think the zestiness is going to be down to a mixture of the talus and the citra in this one. So you get that big bright grassy note in the front of the nose and the bit of floral character behind it, and then you've got all these juicy fruity notes. And it's interesting because the hop that stands out to me in this one, I think, is actually the Simcoe. I think the Simcoe is the kind of anchor of this beer. I'm getting lots of that soft passion fruity note that Simcoe is well known for, but definitely some mango from the citra as well. I'm trying to see, you know, for me, talus has always been more of a kind of pink grapefruit, and you can smell that slightly ripe grapefruit. It's not quite as pungent as a regular grapefruit, but it's quite bright in a sense, and you can smell that above the passion fruit and the juicy mango for sure, but it's just not madly, it's not dominating the beer, I guess we could say. But yeah, for me, it's mango and passion fruit that dominate that. But at the very front of the nose, you are getting some of that tangerine orangey note from the Mosaic. And there is perhaps just a wee bit of the kind of coconutty thing underneath that talus can give you as well. So yeah, the fruity notes for me, it is mainly a mango and passion fruit, citra and Simcoe kind of. I think Simcoe's the one that sticks out most to me in this beer. But yeah, a bit of bright pink grapefruit above that from the talus. And then you start, you know, the further into the nose you get, you start to get more and more of the tangerine qualities from the Mosaic as well. So yeah, as I always say, just take a wee bit of time and enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this and see what it's all about. But lovely smelling beer, definitely up there with the standards that we would expect of Dugas Bryggeri. So yeah, this one is the Nimbus, a 6.5% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Dugas Bryggeri in Landvetter, just outside Gothenburg here in Sweden. Slanja, skål, cheers. Yeah, really nice, just light, drinkable beer for sure. Light, drinkable IPA, gives you a nice bit of maltiness, gives you a good little bit of green component, and it has, you know, the kind of soft, juicy fruits as well, actually. So, yeah, I think Dugas have done another pretty solid job with this one. It does, the first impression I have of it as well is that it is quite a wheaty, bitey leaning New England IPA, this one. And I've always been very curious, you know, when breweries kind of design the recipes for these hops, for these beers, you know, they think, right, I want to use these hops, so I'm going to use this kind of malt base to match it, or do they do it the other way around? I want to try this malt base and then I want to have some hops to match it. I suspect it's probably they start with the hops because the hops are a little bit more difficult to procure and things like that. But yeah, I'd be very curious to know what breweries do when it comes to making these, because this is one of these beers where it just kind of fits together very, very well. Wouldn't expect anything less of Dugas, of course. These guys are very well established and for good reason. But this is quite interesting. This is quite a wheaty leaning beer, this one. The green component has a good little bit of kind of deeper floral character to it, and you've also got those soft, juicy notes in there too. But lovely, lovely beer once again. Very easy going for me. So well done to Dugas for this. So yeah, where do we start with this beer then? Let's put the rest of it out and into the glass. There we are. Yeah, so easy to drink actually as well, as I say. Yeah, so middle third of the palate then with this beer. Backbone, you do get a little bit of that nice kind of fresh white bready bread crust quality with it. That is absolutely the backbone of the beer. And again, as I said, with the aroma, you get the impression that it's a bread crust with just a little bit of floury character on it. But above that, you have that nice kind of wholemeal brown bready character. That kind of sits there. But then, above all of that, you get some kind of fresh white bready character as well. So you've got these kind of three layers forming the backbone of the beer, perhaps toward the kind of front of that middle third of your palate. You do have a wee bit more of a kind of, you've got a slightly woody character in there as well. So yeah, as I say, fresh white bread crust, a little bit of wholemeal brown bread, then you get the white bready character from the barley malt base in this beer, but there is just a little bit of a woody kind of note to this one as well. The further you go into the aftertaste, it almost does give you a bit of an impression of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker too. So maybe in fairness, yeah, bread crust, cracker, brown bread, white bread, it maybe kind of goes like that, to be honest with you. Yeah, that's probably a fair statement. But above all of that, you start to get, you do absolutely get a little bit of a kind of, yeah, you get a little bit of wheat, you know, you can feel the wheaty layer just kind of, you can really feel the wheat just kind of thickening out the whole beer, if that makes sense. And the more that you drink of this beer, you actually start to get a little bit more of wheaty bitiness out of it. So above the kind of fluffy white bread that you have from the barley malt in this beer, you do get the wheat, and the wheat actually really does have a good little bit of zip to it in this beer, which is kind of interesting. So this really is a more kind of, the more that I drink of this beer, the more convinced I become that it's a kind of wheaty leaning IPA. So yeah, definitely that, I have to say. Yeah, I would absolutely stick with that. The wheaty layer above this. That's the thing that's really standing out to me in this beer. This beer, the more that you drink of it, it gets more floral, it gets more wheaty and bitey. Whereas I remember the Nebula was a little bit more kind of juicy and soft and creamy. So again, this is what I'm talking about. I'd be very curious to know what the creative process is that Dugas put into, you know, making each of these different IPAs. Yeah, so I can see why, you know, Talus, for example, the fruity character in this beer, I will say, is quite different from what we picked up in the aroma. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is, the whole way that this beer goes together is really interesting. So you got wheaty bitiness in there, and yeah, it goes together really well in that sense. But yeah, above the wheaty layer, you start to get some of the oaty notes. And as I've always said, when it comes to these New England IPAs, you can use the oatiness to give you an idea of how old and how fresh the beer actually is. Now this beer is not at its prime freshness, you can kind of tell that, because above the wheaty layer you start to get, you know, you've got the oatiness in there. There's a little bit of dryness to the oats, and as I've always said, the creamier the oats are, the fresher your New England IPA is, the drier they are, the older it is. You need to keep this in mind. But yeah, if you go down the kind of middle line of your tongue, you can feel there is a bit of a wet, kind of porridgey, oaty sort of thing there, and as you move further out toward the edges of the palate there, you start to get some of the more kind of dry, oaty characters coming out of the beer. So yeah, yeah, so you've got that nice kind of dry, you've got a little bit of that dryness and a little bit of sweetness from the oaty character as well. And in the dead centre of your palate, you do get just that, there's a little circle there, and you get a wee touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing. And this is above the oats, I should say, as well. So you've got a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing, and as you move out toward the edges of the palate, you've got a little bit of a more kind of biscuity sort of thing too. There's a little bit of that McVitie's Digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah, the malty base in this one's quite interesting. As I say, this is one of the more wheaty and bitey leaning IPAs that I can remember I've had from Dugas. I'd be curious to see the brew sheet of this one compared to the brew sheet of the Nebula that we had before. But I think we've said everything we need to about the middle third of the palate in this beer. So let's go to the back third of the palate then. So border region between middle and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of that bready build up in there. You can feel some of the wheaty bitiness, but base of the back third, a little bit of a more kind of grainy bread crust, of course. Above that, you start to get a bit of you get a little bit of that more kind of brown bready, wholemeal sort of bready kind of thing. And then you get a little bit of a more, you do get a little bit of a more, the kind of white bready from the barley malt notes. You start to get that, and that layer just feels a little bit taller. But above that, you get the wheat, and you get the proper bitiness out of the wheat. And on the back third of the palate, that is pretty powerful. But above all of that, you have a little bit of a more, you do have a little bit of a more kind of yeasty, farmhousey type character to this one. And you can feel that. So you've got that more airy, yeasty white bread in there. And it's almost got just a little bit of that kind of like slightly woody, crackery, farmhousey sort of thing. So I'm getting some of that. But yeah, this beer, as I say, it really is a more kind of wheaty and bitey New England for me. So I quite like that. On the hoppy side of things then, let's move on to the green component of this beer. As always say though, yeah, back third of your palate, flavour is taller. As you come further forward, the flavour's just kind of condensed down and squashed together a little bit. But hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, you have a nice little bit of that kind of earthiness in there. As you move, and that was most likely to be from the mosaic, but as I say, as you move further forward in this one, you actually get quite a lot of kind of big, spicy, floral aromatic notes in it. So this one to me also does feel bitter, and it does feel as if it's got a little bit more kind of IBU to it. So yeah, I think this beer maybe has a little bit more early edition hopping to it. So that would not surprise me at all, because yeah, a little bit of earthiness, and as you move further forward, it gets a lot more kind of floral and aromatic and really quite spicy. But around the front curve of the tongue, definitely lighter and grassy and a wee bit more zesty. It's a bit difficult on the green component to pick out which hop is going to contribute most to that green component, because they all are quite capable in that regard. But let's look at the fruity side of things then, and the front third of the palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you've got a little bit of a bready build up in there. The base of that front third of your palate is more kind of smooth and white bready as well. So yeah, and on top of that, of course, you get that nice oily bubble where the fruity juicy esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, let's go through the fruity side of it just to kind of round off the tasting. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of the stronger grapefruit underneath, which I think will be the Citra, but above that you get the really bright grapefruit, which, as I say, will be the Sabro. But as you move further forward from that, you get passion fruit and mango, and that's going to be both the Citra and the Simcoe that are giving you that. So yeah, very back of the front third of your palate has that really powerful punchy grapefruit and pink grapefruit. Citra will give you the regular grapefruit. The Talus, nearly I was going to say Strata there, but no, the Talus is going to give you that pink grapefruit. But yeah, then it starts to mellow out, and you get the regular passion fruit and the mango. And as you reach the middle of the palate, you've got a wee bit more kind of apricot-y and pineapple-y kind of notes. So yeah, the tropical fruit note in this one is really quite interesting. But it's, as I say, the kind of having that bit of stronger pink and regular grapefruit in this one really mixes in with the wheaty bitiness and the stronger green component that the beer has. But then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you start to get the more you get the more tangerine notes from the mosaic, but they really take a back seat, I think, to the more kind of tropical fruits and the grapefruit. The grapefruit really is quite powerful in this beer, actually. So yeah, grapefruit, pink grapefruit on top, grapefruit underneath, bit of passion fruit, bit of mango, maybe tiny little hints of like apricot and pineapple and stuff there. But yeah, front third of your palate is more kind of tangerine and orangey, basically because of the mosaic. I think that covers the fruity side of this beer, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, that's interesting. I think we've said everything we need to about the flavour of the beer. Mouthfeel wise, then, to round off, for me, this beer's right in the middle of the spectrum. It's mid bodied. The carbonation has a little bit of crispness to it. You do get a wee bit of carbonation out of this beer for sure. But overall, the mouthfeel is, just very smooth and very drinkable. The Dugas IPAs have a very distinctive mouthfeel to them. Just a little touch of kind of dryness and almost chalkiness or something like that. But as I say, just very kind of drinkable. Like I said, for me, overall, as a New England IPA, this one is very wheaty leaning. It actually feels as if it has quite a slightly stronger IBU to it. I wouldn't be surprised if this is maybe 50 IBUs, 60 IBUs, something like that. It does certainly have a wee bit more bitterness to it for sure. The malt base, as we said, smooth, tiny little bit of sweetness to it, but quite a lot of wheaty bitiness. Then you've got that nice, slightly juicier, fruity quality to it as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together for me is really, really nice. Quite different from the Nebula, and that's, again, this is kind of showing you the differences you can, the quite major differences you can make within this little style category, depending on how you play with your recipe. I would be very curious to see the brew sheets between this one and the Nebula that we reviewed a few videos ago, because they really show you two different sides of the New England. I remember Nebula being more juicy and kind of oaty and things. This one's definitely more wheaty and bitey and more green as well and more bitter. So yeah, another very interesting beer from Dugas Bryggeri, of course. So yeah, that's everything we need to say about this one. This one was the Dugas Nimbus, 6.5% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Really nice beer, very wheaty and bitey, New England. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Till the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Dugas Bryggeri as well, and we will no doubt return to them at some point in the near future. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you again